I'll always wonder if Gust knew how big Ryza would make the Atelier series. The entry before Atelier Ryza, Atelier Lydie and Suelle had the series at a good quality level in its niche, but in a cutesy direction combined with intricate alchemy and good RPG elements, with the tomboy adventurous direction in the entry before with Firis maybe letting them know that this could work again. Whether it was the coming-of-age story, huge worlds we could explore with Atelier's signature alchemy, character designs, or the combination of everything, 2019's Atelier Ryza was a huge success for the series, so it makes sense they tried give it another spin when they released the Atelier Ryza Secret Trilogy Deluxe pack last year in November as the definitive way to play the trilogy. The Deluxe edition wasn't just a simple re-release, and shouldn't be as it was already available on most modern consoles. Instead, it takes the original games and sprinkles in new features, with new cutscenes, episodes, and new beasts to use, making an excuse for a second playthrough if you're looking for one. My second playthrough of all three in their DX forums ended up being about 171 hours, so it's quite the commitment to feel all the new features and how they changed the core experience of each Ryza, with the outside of the main campaign story episodes amounting to more like 10, but then not really justifying the price tag. So I had to jump in and fully replay each DX version, enjoying the full of parties, the DLC I missed, and full of story arcs between certain characters that made for an even thicker Atelier Ryza journey, played in a more nostalgic way thanks to it being almost 7 years since I played the first one and the rest after. It's up to fans who have already played to decide if the time sink again is worth it, but for those who haven't tried Ryza at all, these are the versions to dive you in as deep as you could ever want to go into Ryza's world and its secrets, and is a reminder of the huge steps Gust took to make the series what it is today while experiencing their best story to date. Anticipating a return to a world I loved when it first came out, I was so excited to go back to Atelier Ryza 1 in its DX version. When I first played Ryza 1, it was one of the first games I received from Koei Tecmo for review, and while my hour count somehow ended up being similar in both my old playthrough and the one I just did at a little under 40 hours, I'm much better at enjoying my playthroughs while balancing a good amount of side content these days that I struggled with during my first review codes, and I think is evident in how in my original Ryza review I said I wasn't popping many events, whereas I feel like this playthrough I saw a ton that made this one feel much better. In fact, this was a pretty meaty Atelier Ryza playthrough thanks to the new DX content that I took all the time to play. Most of it is extracurricular in the way it's not needed to enjoy the core story, as a lot of it was DLC released after the game, although there was one piece of new content I really appreciated, which were the added moments between Boss and Kilo that make Boss's arc make much more sense. In hindsight, because of its runtime being a reasonable 40 hours, Ryza's story can feel like it moves a little quickly, even if you're doing side content. One moment she's leaving the village, and then an eventful but quick 10 hours later she's fighting a dragon, making it feel like she grows up quickly, which the new after-story content actually manages to address. This can also be felt in Boss, who felt like he went from being the worst to normal after meeting a cute girl and seeing one weird place, but the new content shows the inspiration behind his massive change in personality that sets him up perfectly for the arc in Ryza 2 and his eventual party debut in 3 in a small but meaningful DX story part that adds the depth his story was missing. The core Ryza playthrough, aside from its DX editions, is mostly the already great story of Atelier Ryza that hits just as hard as before. We watch Ryza's coming-of-age story as she not only achieves her goal of getting off her island, but also finding out exactly what she wants to hold dear along the way, making her the right, fun, but reflective protagonist that feels good to journey and watch grow throughout all three, next to the still quality cast of companions on the way that add their own flavor and trowels to the story. With that second playthrough feeling, I also found my understanding of everyone that little bit deeper. Claudia is able to see the group from an outside perspective, which is why she can understand the dynamic with Boss better than they do. Len isn't just a teenager with a bad father, he actually wanted to know why his father did what he did, and is a good friend especially to Boss along the way when he recognizes the same kind of dissatisfaction in him. I also found Tao's reluctant personality hilarious the second time that made me like him more overall, and very important for later moments is the blossoming of our understanding of Empel and Leela's relationship that is as beautiful to watch as it should be, as they realize how Ryza can help them help each other as Ryza becomes an even stronger alchemy apprentice. Outside of story are Ryza's fast-paced ATB battles, but in DX with extra party members, with Rami, Kila, and Agatha as new members of the party you unlock as you play. The timing of when these characters come in somewhat makes sense, with for example Kilo joining right when you think she would, but their existence in Ryza DX is purely just as extra muscle, as there are also points in the story where it would make no sense to use them, so we're meant to ignore the story relevance and just use them anyway. This adds a nice bit of new flavor to DX playthroughs though, as do the many new costumes and aesthetic additions that you'll find common in all of the DXs. The DX features I really appreciated were mostly mechanical though. For example, I don't know if I just missed the swing one-hit KO ability if you're many levels above an enemy, but I got that in this playthrough and it was so useful, especially in the included episodes that were previously paid DLC. In all of these, even the new DX after story, your builds are set, so while it's interesting to play with a different build, I also missed my own Atelier and gears, so in episodes where I could avoid battle, I was happy I could one-hit the weaker enemies and just enjoy the extra story content, rather than the feeling I was playing in someone else's game. As for these extra stories, except for the newest edition, I would mostly say these previous DLC stories were good, extra sprinkles of moments with characters I already liked. What they brought into the main game was probably my favorite, as one of the things I'm most excited for post-game are the super hard bosses, so having the new high difficulty area and the boss from episode Lent on my map are things I appreciate, along with items like the bomb used when Ryza first discovers alchemy being welcome additions to the things I can synthesize in the main game. Among my DLC story favorites were the summer one for its light-hearted scenes, and Atelier Claudia is still incredibly sweet, but my absolute favorite of the extra story episodes has to be the new after story featuring Ryza, Romy, and Agatha. After story is fully voiced unlike the other episodes that instantly makes it feel better, and has the more cinematic camera angles and scenes to show the modern-day Gust mastery of making stories look and feel even better these days. Best of all, it shows Ryza a year before her look matures for Ryza 2, and shows the teaching days we hear she did before and how they might have led her to mature between journeys, with seeing the kids respond to the way she is at the beginning and end of Atelier Ryza being a realistic look into how people could react to such a drastic change, especially on a small island like Kuken. After story is a must play if you miss Ryza and want more story, but is a hard sell to anyone who already has all the DLC of the first, as it's only maybe an hour or two of new content. If you've already done everything there is to see in Ryza 1, a purchase of this particular Ryza DX version will depend how much you want that second playthrough experience, how much you need that extra story, how excited you are to play with the new party members, and how much you saw the first time round. I hadn't touched Ryza since my first playthrough and didn't buy much DLC, so personally I was really happy I could touch the world of Ryza again and experience the story in a deeper way, both thanks to newer content and it not being so fresh in my mind, as I found deeper ways to play its many episodes, and had me entering my Ryza 2 journey with plenty of love for the sentimental Ryza in my heart as I prepared to enter one of the most moving entries of the trilogy. Atelier Ryza 2 felt like a journey and a half to play, especially for how long in terms of time it took me to actually get through it. I ended up receiving some must-play new releases during my playthrough that meant I was playing Ryza 2 DX on and off between late January and the end of April, but it also became that warm blanket of a game for me in the middle months that always felt nice to get some time in, with its synthesis system easy to learn but difficult to master thanks to new additions in Core 2 with things like essences, and the benefits from this being the DX version making it easier in ways that made this my favorite playthrough of Ryza 2. A game-changing addition to Ryza 2 DX is Fi, the sweet fairy that comes with Ryza on this journey, this time in a gameplay role. As you play and unlock ruins, Fi also gains abilities like widening your compass range in the dungeon, getting you extra drops, and best of all, giving you extra items when you synthesize, fixing one of my occasional issues with Atelier that, until you get item duplication, quest items are things I made with my worst stuff, and then watched my lovely Atelier girl have a conversation with someone about how wonderful the quality 5 item I just gave them was. With Fi duplicating every item, I did my best at every synthesis and was often rewarded for it, and this with also hearing Fi audibly at Ryza's side became a nice part of running around in Ryza and Fi's story, with some occasional petting along the way. It was in this playthrough of Ryza 2 I was really reminded how much it makes you care for Fi and the rest of the party thanks to all of its smaller moments and events. Standouts are the first moments of Patty and Tao, the original crew's reunion with Len, and watching Sari learn that Ryza may not be like other alchemists that are all parts that make Ryza 2 a compelling playthrough, along with then continuing to discover the history that links to all the lore established in the first game, making a lot more sense playing 1 and 2 back to back. In this DX version, an important blank in the story is filled thanks to the new Empel and Leela episode that makes our circumstances in 2 seem less like a sudden plot device and more like an actual part of the greater story. If you enjoyed the exploration of newer ateliers like Yumia and Reslariana Red and White, this episode's exploration leans closer to that, with more puzzle-like elements to interact with, which is debatably more fun than the actual dungeon clue finding of the core Ryza 2 game. I'm still trying to work out if I'm happy I played this episode where it sits in the timeline, or if I should have played it just before the second part when what they do comes into the story, but either way, it made their role a much smoother fit and should definitely be played to help make 2's latter story make more sense. And after Ruins felt so smooth playing as Leela in their part, I had to think a lot about how I felt about Ryza 2's Ruins exploration that, except for a little help from V, is still the same here. I like how it can still feel like a Danganronpa style compiling of clues to get to a conclusion, and I still 100%ed each one because it felt silly not to after getting so many clues. But because there are so many clues hidden and you don't always find the right ones to progress the story immediately, while it is realistic to feel Ryza and friends couldn't control the clues they find, maybe except for the ones hidden within fun boss battles, it does bloat out dungeon runs in a way that sometimes feels unnecessary. I like it in the way I like Danganronpa, but I still wonder if some slight translation improvements to make some of his hints more nuanced could make it a little easier, but they are achievable if you don't mind running around and finding all the ones you need, and at least this time you can do it with Fee behind you and the swing ability. Combat, however, takes a perfect improvement in 2, with the fact you can actively guard enemy attacks, giving Ryza's turn-based combat the active element that makes it feel quick and fun. Ironically, I did a lot of battles while trying to keep Ryza and friends strong so I could use swing that made finding things in its ruins a lot more peaceful, and those combat moments remained fun even when I was just dishing out the same strategies. The active element keeps you that little bit on your toes, enough to make every battle feel different, and in the second playthrough, I felt like I was much better at using passive and active modes, and saw way more special attacks than my first time through. The extra muscle in this DX version comes from Leela and Empel, Leela particularly useful as she covers a lot of elemental weaknesses. But with the way you're encouraged to switch characters on the fly, I felt like using all my characters, so I used them less than I used new characters like Romy in 1DX. But more party members is always useful, so I'm sure fans will appreciate them, especially in this story where Empel and Leela are only shown for a short time. Finally, aside from Fee helping to give extra items, I was reminded the synthesis in Ryza 2 is great as well. It's the same good system from Ryza 1, but laid out a little nicer, and tied with a big skill tree to get new recipes from. I did find it interesting that this time, except for one the tutorial gives you hints for, I didn't need X synthesis at all this playthrough, maybe because I ended up overall higher level, reaching level cap by the end. Alchemy became important towards the end of my playthrough, and the thing I love about Atelier, where you can be totally over-leveled, but it doesn't matter if you haven't kept up with making your equipment and items better, so I definitely did more alchemy towards the end, took advantage of weapon enhancement from Dennis, one of the many good side characters from Ryza that I like but will also likely forget again, and came into the final boss strong enough to do it in 2 tries after a satisfying 65-hour journey. I left Ryza 2 on its sadder note, so glad I could have this journey again as my favorite from the Ryza trilogy. It managed to move me a lot in its final moments thanks to how much it has you fall in love with its characters, setting up Ryza's next journey with growing pains that make the way she feels more adult in Ryza 3 make sense. While there's less new story in this DX as it seems this one and 3 had less DLC overall, the gameplay features with V ended up making me really like this second playthrough, even more than the Empel and Leela content that mostly just detailed what we already knew was their role in the story. The V features are the real star of this particular DX version that are going to make it feel the most worthwhile, with V's duplication ability especially encouraging me to make the best items I could, and his presence giving the right feeling to make the ending really hit. Before my 3DX playthrough, I wondered if its Wind Beast would have the same feeling on a gameplay level, and already knew that they wouldn't fill the emotional hole of 2's special fairy, but I'm glad to see that on a gameplay level, this DX version feels even better than the first, entering 3 with a heavy heart on the way to the end of Ryza's journey again. By the time I got to Atelier Ryza 3, it'd basically been 6 months of playing Ryza since I previewed the DX versions in December of last year and finished 3DX in June, marking the end of my Ryza DX Trilogy journey and another 66 hours of play. I knew Ryza 3DX would be a good journey, as third Atelier Trilogy games are always the best ones, where Gust learns from any shortcomings of the previous two and polishes things as much as possible in the final entry, with Ryza 3 benefiting from this as its big areas expanded to wide open fields and connected maps, pairing well with battles starting immediately, and its DX edition taking inspiration from this, with a new wind beast that can auto-gather for you while you run around, meaning you can focus on running and exploring wherever you want, rather than trying to focus on everything in such a massive world. Don't worry if you think this will remove some of the essence of Atelier though, with gathering yourself still important at times. The wind beast runs out of steam eventually and has to recharge, and also chooses which gathering tool it's gathering materials from, so if you're looking for a specific item on the field, sometimes it's better to just do it yourself, resulting in a good balance of convenience and finding materials to keep things feeling as they should. Also, I didn't get the wind beast until I was about 40 hours in after discovering its 4 main areas and getting refreshed on the main story, and even after I did 3DX's new Sari and Clifford content, and while I do think it's at least part of the reason this 3DX playthrough was over 20 hours shorter than my original run, I did plenty of adventuring before I got it, so while it does streamline things, it mostly felt like a comfy exploration reward for all the gameplay I'd done already, so I'd recommend letting it pop up naturally, as by the time you get it, you've likely earned it. As for the Clifford and Sari part of 3DX, this story episode I'd easily call my favorite of all the new stories. Fans know that even mention of the two was criminally low in Ryza 3, so it was cool to see this story episode righting that wrong while also giving a modern Atelier flavored slice of Ryza 3, much like in the Empel and Leela episode of 2. The exploration part was fun, especially to do as Sari, but it was mostly the story of this DLC that impressed me the most. Because I knew this episode was coming during Ryza 2 DX, I kept a special eye on Clifford and Sari's dynamic, and they actually don't interact that much, mostly with Sari responding to him with sarcasm. This is where the two start in this DLC, but if this weird pair intrigues you, the growth of their relationship is well worth seeing and highlights their best points, with Clifford's romantic treasure hunting being a fun thing to center this episode around. It made me happy to keep them in my party once I got them in the core Ryza 3DX game, and made the few tiny mentions they got in the story more interesting, and is my pick of must-play new story as a nice cherry on top of an already fantastic journey, with an extra scene later in 3DX with Boss and Kilo to tie their story up to, making every end and missing part feel finished in this final Ryza experience. When it comes to the rest of my playthrough, there were things I loved in this third Ryza game, but also some minor things I was actually surprised to enjoy less that are specific to 3. It's definitely still the best version of the trilogy synthesis. I could really feel in this final form how fun it is to do its skill tree, and alchemy being where the key feature of this third game really shines, making items able to explode in potential, and this along with the items Ryza can make show how much she's grown from making healing salves to much more world-bending things by the end. The creating of keys is something I felt was less enjoyable this time round though. While it makes sense Ryza would have to synthesize these as she goes, this took a lot of the time I'd take in the brief returns to the Atelier to make better equipment to instead make the same pristine key again and again. This could be a slight user error, as you do have the choice of ignoring this feature and taking more time to synthesize, but some of Ryza 3's coolest features like powering up in battle and unlocking extra areas on the map involve keys, so I felt the need to at least keep the minimum amount on me, which you do get a head start with in DX at least. I could get to the end of the game with fairly basic equipment though, and thanks to the swing feature also ended up being at level cap by the end that helped me finish after a few equipment tweaks, so it's not game breaking, but since Atelier can be a pretty intricate game when you consider all of its mechanics, this might have been that one more on top that made it harder to manage everything when compared to 2. It's not to say it isn't enjoyable though, and I still hold my opinion that it's the high quality third Atelier it should be. Exploration feels great on its massive fields, especially with the wind beast, the battle system keeps everything good from 2, and the keys there feel like the right kind of addition to a good system. This probably also has the best localization of all 3, with character interactions feeling natural and full of life throughout the story, and this is especially important to help us feel the growth of the core group in this big story. Kukin's Ryza, Lent, Tao, and Boss have come a really long way from their island days. Claudia is also very much an adult now, and with a new, mostly younger cast to show this further as they discover new worlds, by the end of the story I felt I saw them more as a group of interesting and capable travelers shaped by their journey, rather than the troublemakers of one figuring out things as they went. Characters like Empel and Leela, who started off older, get growth as well to make sticking with the whole group have the payoff it should, especially in the signature goodbye events at the end that used to be a really nice send-off in the Atelier series that I hope they at least bring back for the final part of the Memories trilogy. Having it in Ryza 3DX, I felt the most benefit of DX's new story episodes in these goodbyes, as it really felt like all the small moments I'd had with everyone helped me see the full picture of their growth by the end. Wrapped in its goodbye bow, it was naturally a bittersweet end to a long journey of re-witnessing Ryza's journey, but the far and wide adventure in 3DX still feels like the perfect way to end it. It walks you through the final layer of its history and the new story set in ruins and mysteries at the slow, thought-out pace it should, and packs payoff for fans old and new, especially in DX, to make every side of its story have its fitting end. It's a wonderful endpoint to the Secret Trilogy, with a healthy amount of potential for Gust to maybe deploy their most popular protagonist again someday, but until then, the extra polished Atelier Ryza 3DX serves as a more comfortable and story-filled way to end a great coming-of-age story. 171 hours later, I can now say I replayed the Ryza Trilogy and felt the DX features to the extent I wanted to get to know and feel how they added to a core playthrough, all to finally answer the question, are these DX versions worth it? As a purchase of Atelier Ryza for someone who hasn't played the non-DX version, my answer is absolutely. With the highest amount of party members for all situations, and slice-of-life features like Fee and the Wind Beast to make playthroughs a little easier and more immersive, the DX versions offer plenty to improve a first Ryza playthrough, both in streamlining gameplay to make it possible to finish faster, and with plenty of extra story content, costumes, and areas to dive into if you end up falling in love with these games. Also, at least digitally, these are the main versions of Ryza available to play anyway, but can be bought individually as you go as well if you just want to dip a toe in first. The best value is getting them all together, but each individual game is also cheaper than the originals were at launch, so you're getting more content to enjoy at a better price in these perfected versions of the Atelier Ryza experience. As for those who have already played the Ryza games, considering adding these DX versions to your collections, that'll likely depend on your desire to replay or collect. On one hand, I feel like I got different Ryza experiences thanks to its new small in-game additions, with V running around with Ryza on the map in 2DX making it easily my favorite version of that Ryza game. However, 1 and 3DX don't have new story link features like that, even though they do deepen the story of certain characters. While characters like Boss and Kilos benefit from the extra detail, it wasn't entirely necessary as their story is wrapped up the same by the end of Ryza 3, so I don't know if a few cutscenes is worth a full-on repurchase for those who felt like something was missing when it came to their story. Ultimately, I really do think it comes down to the individual here. If you can sit without having seen Ryza's new afterstory bridging the gap between 1 and 2, and knowing there are Ryza episodes only in these new versions, or you've had the hankering to see how these versions would all flow together in a super back-to-back playthrough like I did, it's great these DX versions exist for that, so it's worth the price tag in that case. But I also know firsthand we're all juggling more new releases than ever these days, so if waiting for a sale seems like a good way to add them to collection, or saying I've played them all, I don't need them is how you feel, I would support that too, as 171 hours and the way I was able to fit it into my life meant it took me 7 months to finish. That was a pretty big chunk of my gaming time for the year used up. I personally wouldn't change it, and would have repurchased these versions myself if I wasn't sent them, the same way I feel about Gust's next upcoming DX-style release, Blue Reflection Quartet. I think there's value to be found in the second playthrough experience. I haven't done something like that in a while and wanted to feel how these games flowed back to back compared to Gust's yearly release cycle, and can now go on knowing that this trilogy does flow well if played all together, and I had a lot of payoff in Ryza 3DX's final moments thanks to the time commitment I put in, and still have plenty of extra dungeons and recipes to unlock if I choose to. Playing all of the Ryza trilogy in 2026 certainly isn't for everyone, but it's something I'm very much glad I did, as I could see things differently in this frame of life 7 years later, and I hope these DX versions at the very least encourage those who might want to play the trilogy again to do it in a newer and more thickly packed way. Looking at the Atelier Ryza Trilogy, I have to be thankful for everything it's done for my favorite series. It allowed current-day Gust to dive into the exploration part that fans loved in the Secret Trilogy that I think they wanted to explore too, and while he had a necessary bump along the way with Service Res Lariana and the desire to explore more cinematic visuals there, it all led to two wonderful newer ateliers, Atelier Yumia and Consoles Res Lariana Red and White, with the things they learned about making fields open and dynamic or developing relationships being where Ryza Ryza walked so they could run, and making me feel like the upcoming Atelier Karia will benefit from those things too, with a bright personality and exploration mechanics to look forward to that they know we've enjoyed since Ryza's summer adventure, along with the promise of plenty of secrets and mysteries too. I still in many ways feel that, despite the continued increase in quality since, Atelier Ryza and her trilogy are Gust's masterpiece. While the Memories trilogy is ultimately in its early days, and it's maybe not fair to compare to the Reslariana games, the cast of Atelier Ryza and their arcs are the most developed throughout all the Atelier trilogies I've played, and there's a reason that Atelier Ryza is their most popular game ever. In Ryza, by the end, they weren't afraid to conclude the canon romances we watched blossom throughout 3 games. Each character had a clear start and end to their arcs, with ones like Lent going from a young boy in a bad home to a truly worthy adventurer in his own right by the end of 3, and seeing Ryza's core desire for constant adventure woven into the conclusion made everything feel right, with the choice to have one ending at the end of each one definitely serving to make this a solid Atelier narrative that a lot of people enjoyed. I liked Yumia, but the first Atelier Ryza feels like it had some magic woven into it, with the premise of young kids hungry for adventure, an adventure they did after 3 big games leading to a satisfying journey as they uncovered the secrets of their world and the craft Ryza discovered and became amazing at by the end. It's also thanks to Atelier Ryza I know Gust have it in them to tell fully developed stories, so whether it's in the Memories trilogy or in future games, I hope they manage to capture this magic again. But for now, I'm so thankful for the second magical time the trilogy gave me and the DX version to play it in as I go forward in my own gaming and Atelier journeys, looking to feel the magic of an adventurous trilogy like this someday somewhere again. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried Atelier Ryza in this version or the original, and of course all your thoughts about it. You can like and share this big old video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel for more JRPG content like this, and ring that bell to get notifications on whenever I post so you don't miss a thing. You can check out more videos here, and you can find me on social media on X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at JRPG Jungle. Links to those will be in the description below. Thank you to Koei Tecmo for sending me this ages ago, and until next time, thank you, bye!